friends, I passed by those candles. I was wondering that if I ever lighted them, that I could play like Liberace. Last week, someone in the studio came with a camera, and a woman alongside of her said, "Don't shoot now. Wait until he starts talking, then shoot him." Listen, I must tell you a story. It's an ecumenical story. It's about a priest and a rabbi. They met in a train in Ireland. They were alone in the compartment, and the priest said to the rabbi, he says, "Rabbi, honestly, have you ever eaten pork in your life?" The rabbi said, "If you keep a secret, I will tell you. I ate pork once." "Now," said the rabbi, "let me ask you a question. Did you ever kiss a girl?" He said, "If you keep it a secret, I will tell you. I did kiss a girl once." The rabbi said, "It beats eating pork, doesn't it?" Those are the kind of stories you can tell about religions that doesn't get anybody into trouble. Well, the title of this telecast, you remember, is about holding us together, because we're living in an entirely different age. Our new task is quite different. The new task is how to prevent ourselves from going to pieces. In other words, that ever since we split the atom, people are split. Races, nationalities, social groups. It seems as if almost all the rivets have fallen apart in the skyscraper of our civilization. Years ago, Conrad, the novelist, wrote a story about a ship in a river in Africa. The Captain Marlowe was pacing up and down the deck of this small ship. He was waiting for repairs. Along the shore, he could see the native Africans dancing, singing, mocking him. And as Marlowe paced the deck, he said, "Rivets, by heavens! That's what I need. Up there at the station on the hill, boxes of them piled open. Said you kick them as you walk along. They roll down the siding. And here I don't have a single rivet to put my plates together." And this was the contrast between these carefree people and a technical civilization that was all at loss for progress because there were no rivets. Now that's what's making us fall apart. The absence of some unifying principle. Just let me give you now some examples of how we're falling apart. I will take education and literature and maybe philosophy and a few other things. First of all, take education. It used to be centuries ago that there were universities. Now, the word university means something that turns about one thing. And what was that one thing? Well, in the Middle Ages, it was theology. All sciences were, as it were, in relation to that. And later on, it became philosophy. Another university, the microbic content of cotton undershirts. What a wonderful thesis that was. PhD. But I think the prize was one of our well-known Eastern universities, a psychological study of the post-rotational eye movement of squabs. Then take the press, rivets falling apart, and TV, even. Here, for example, on TV, suppose I were a news commentator. I would show you, for example, here is a clip that has just come to us this afternoon from Vietnam. That shows a bomb dropping on one of the cities of Vietnam in which 10,000 people were killed. More details of this horrible massacre will be unfolded to you after this brief announcement. The white knight will clean your dishes. Think what becomes of us. It means that both are meaningless. When we can shift so quickly from a story of horror and death to this insignificant detail about soap. Then the press is interested in getting your opinion and yours, everybody's opinion. Not because of the opinion itself, but to set it in contrast with someone else's opinion. So, as long as there's conflict, there's news. What's the purpose of opinions? Are we trying to develop a meaning and a philosophy of life? And this has so much affected personalities that today many minds have no unifying pattern of life. They read one book, maybe a bestseller, and they say, oh, this is a great idea. And they lay down the railroad tracks on which they will move. Then next week they read another book, and they tear up those tracks. They were a materialist last week. Now this week they begin to be an idealist. And as life goes on, they never have one goal or one purpose. No rivets in life. Now this is serious. If this were a class in school, in a university, I would go more into detail. But just let me go through famous writers and thinkers and give you their concept of this rivetless civilization. 200 years ago, de Tocqueville, who wrote a great deal about America and who foresaw America, said Americans are going to be superficial. They'll be interested in the surface of things and will not get down to depths. Then if you take those who have made a study of Grecian democracy, what made it fail, the Middle Ages, what made it fail, our contemporary civilization, you get always the same answer. There was nothing to hold civilization together. For example, Jaeger. Those of you who are in the university probably have read Jaeger. His work on Padaya, which Jaeger shows that the Greek democracy of the pre-Christian times went to pieces just as soon as it lost its gods, its faith, and its myths. Collingwood wrote about the Middle Ages. Collingwood said that the Middle Ages went to pieces just as soon as it lost its faith. Politics and economics, he said, began to be independent of theology and morals and ethics. Philosophy was separated from theology, and the unity of civilization decayed. In our modern times, Reinhold Niebuhr compares our civilization to Babel, in which he says men are confused. Each one is trying to make himself a god and finally eventually to reach the heavens. And the attempt fails. And Toynbee wrote 10 volumes called A Study of History. And he says that our age is suffering from a schism of soul. That is to say, we've lost all of our unity, and we're like the pyramid builders. What, he said, was Egypt trying to do when it built the pyramids? It was trying to forget the slavery of people. And so upon all of that forced labor was erected this monument to resist decay, and it became the very basis of decay itself. I wonder if going to the moon, $77 billion a year in preparation for war, is not another Babel. Is it not based not upon slavery, but upon a neglect of the poor? May it not end as Egyptian civilization ended? These are the questions which thinkers are asking. I've just tried to put it simply in terms of rivets, which hold the plates of our economics and politics and education and everything else together. Now there's a danger, a grave danger in our civilization. Today the catchword is freedom. Someday we'll explain the 3 ways in which freedom can be understood. But freedom today is interpreted as license, as freedom from law, not freedom for something. When you have a culture fissioned, split up, and divided, and minds without any goals, you have chaos, which is becoming more and more apparent in civilization. What is the danger? The danger is that there may come along someone who will attempt to get us out of this chaos by creating some kind of maybe totalitarian state. In other words, a dictatorship arises in order to organize the chaos that was created by too much freedom. As a Russian writer put it, who had been through the communist revolution, and if you keep these words in mind, they may help to interpret future civilization. Unlimited freedom leads to unlimited tyranny. Communism was only an organization, forcible organization of a chaos. When shepherds cannot get their sheep to follow them, they send dogs after them. We're in danger of having dogs run after us to organize us out of this chaos. As Dostoevsky, the French novelist, put it, he said, I wouldn't be at all surprised that there might arise out of our cities in some future day someone unlearned would say, let's knock to pieces all of this supposed wisdom. Let us smash all of our logarithms to pieces. Let us go our own way. And you'll be surprised how many followers we will have. I know it's not a pleasant picture, but I'm just trying to keep up in what's happening in the world. And not just to be a part of this rivetless culture. Now, what will hold us together? Knowledge? No, not knowledge alone. We have indeed eaten of the tree of knowledge, the knowledge of good and evil. We've picked off the fruit, and now we're eating the leaves. And knowledge, anyway, when it's about things above, always demands that we break up those noble things to fit our poor intelligences. What can unify civilization? Love. Oh, yes, but how that word is misused. The Greeks had 4 words for love. 4. Believe me, when we say the Greeks had a word for it, they did. Someday I may give a telecast on those 4 words. But today, we have only 1 word for love. Certainly we can call in an absolutely unprejudiced witness in the novelist Fulton. Let me read you what he says. In other words, this is not the kind of love that will save us, the kind that he is describing, and which, incidentally, he repudiates. He says, love, if you will, because it can't last. There's no place for it in the world today. We have eliminated it. That is, eliminated the true love. It took us a long time. But man is resourceful. So we got rid of love at last. Just as we got rid of Christ. If Venus returned today, or if Jesus returned today, we would crucify him quick in our defense. If Venus returned, she would be a soiled man in a subway lavatory with a palm full of dirty French postcards. That's what's happened to our concept of love, noble love, as it has degenerated into eroticism. But love is still the answer. What kind of love? What's the rivet that will hold us together? Oh, I forgot to signal my angel. It's not his fault. It's 3. We have mysterious winks. I do things like this. You'll always notice them. This means that you wash off the blackboard. This means that you don't wash. Have you ever noticed me doing those things? No? Well, what is the kind of love that will save us? Put rivets into our civilization. 3 things. First of all, the only thing we can ever love is a person. We just simply cannot fall in love with the theorem of geometry, or a syllogism, or an abstraction. Even virtue itself is unappealing until virtue begins to be seen in a person. Why is it, for example, that today conversions take place more in the middle classes and upper classes than they do down below? Slums and inner city and among the poor. It's because the people in the upper classes can read, they can study, they can make comparisons, they know something about psychology and metaphysics, and they come to a concept of truth. But the people below, they're not doing any reading. The only way they know about it is the way that the people live. And unless they can see that the man of religion there is a little bit different from the rest of them, unless they can see that his love is of an entirely different character than the love that they know, even the best of them, and religion will never make any appeal. Second, love must be a person. Secondly, that person must have suffered defeat. That is important. Why? Why must the person have suffered defeat that we love? Because we're defeated. That's why. Because we're frustrated. Believe me, we are not looking for heroes. What we fear not so much, what we fear actually is not death. What we fear is defeat. Death only touches our existence. Defeat touches our personality. And if we're ever to put love, ever to put rivets into civilization, we have to find some person who's gone down to defeat, and in that defeat has become victorious. And there's only one man that's ever done that. And even if he were wrong, which he's not, I would rather be wrong with him than right with the other.
The sea is calm tonight. The tide is full. The moon lies fair upon the straits. Words from the English poet Matthew Arnold. A stream of water creates its own pathway, a spiraling journey, past many places, always moving toward the sea. It is like our human journey. We seek the fulfillment of inner needs that only our soul and God know about. We look for our pathway. After his baptism by John, 2 men asked Jesus, "Where do you live?" Jesus answered, "Come and see." It is an invitation that we should accept. It is a direction along our pathway. People of all faiths recognized Bishop Fulton J. Sheen as one of the greatest communicators of the 20th century. He was born in El Paso, Illinois, in May of 1896. As a young boy, he knew he wanted to be a priest. He served as an altar boy at St. Mary's Cathedral in Peoria, Illinois. At St. Viator College, his education and debating skills taught him the skills he used throughout his life. His unique ability at being natural and at ease in front of any audience was noted early in his ministry. He was ordained in 1919 and went on to become one of the best-known and greatly loved priests in church history. He wrote 96 books and hundreds of articles and columns. He broadcast numerous radio and TV programs. People from all faiths watched him on television because he spoke to every man. They always waited with joy for his goodbye, his blessing, "God love you." It continues to give us joy and memories.
Bye now, and God love you.
Bishop Fulton J. Sheen went to be with the Lord in December of 1979. Fulton J. Sheen, requiescat in pace.
Violence and so forth. Perhaps it's very fitting that we should say something about America's religion. And here we come to an application of the words, "Physician, heal thyself." In other words, what have you got to say about religion? And here we speak of Christianity in general, not about any particular sect or about the church to which I belong, or the church in a general, but rather the church in a general and vague sort of way. What are the critiques of religion? And what is our moment of truth? Is there any justification for pointing a finger at Christianity as it exists today? Perhaps there is. And the first critique might be this: One, we will refer to the affluence of the church itself, and then we will refer to the laity, and then we'll refer to the doctrine and teaching. So the first will involve bishops, priests, ministers, and the like, lay leaders. First, as regards the bishops and priests and ministers. Has affluence hurt us? Have we grown fat? Does the economic and generous leverage of the pews hurt the prophetic utterance from the pulpit and the altar? Conceivably. Because I believe that there is some kind of a relationship existing between prosperity and the effect of Christianity at any moment. When we are affluent and rich, we are apt to become administrators. That for times of prosperity. But in times of adversity, we're more apt to become shepherds. In times of prosperity, we become very much concerned with mortar and building. We make use of all the resources that we have, generally for ourselves, translate them into buildings, and that emphasis could hurt the stress on mortals, on human beings. In the early church, remember the apostles said, we can't be busying ourselves with tables, with administration. So they found 7 administrators to take over the work in order that they could preach. Administrators today in Christianity sit at desks. And I wonder if about 60% of that work could not be done better by laity. In mission countries where there's poverty, there's shepherds. They're out with the people. They're not at a desk, they're at a doorbell, at a tent. So there is here a tendency to become comfortable rather than to be comforters. This doesn't mean that living in a prosperous country we should not utilize all of the economic means that are put into our hands. But we're only speaking of a danger in an affluent society. Namely, we are sent to the sheep. No one will challenge that. But in an affluent society, what do? We generally shear them. In other words, take their wool, or what comes out of their wool pockets. Our divine master said that we were to feed the lambs and feed the sheep. Again, this does not mean that they are not to be sheared. But sometimes those who were called prominent Catholic, he's a prominent Catholic, he's a prominent Methodist, he's the prominent Congregationalist, he's a prominent Lutheran. What does it mean? It means he's given a lot of his wool. He may not be prominent in the way of shepherding. Now, this is one of the critiques that is sometimes urged against Christianity, and after all, with some degree of justice. If we continue this moment of truth, we come to the laity, and we leave the priests and ministers. And what about the laity? Well, I don't know how anxious my angel is to wipe a blackboard in which there is any critique of Christianity. I'm sure the angel is very anxious. But having done the job, we now come to the laity, and we find again another type of critique. There seems to be in the laity a rupture, a division between their religion and life itself. Between the church to which they move on Sunday and the secular life in which they move 6 days of the week. Now, certainly, there is not to be as much time spent in a church as in the secular order. Here we're speaking of the spirit. Let us put it this way. If you sat down at table with 12 people, or rather you watched 12 people at table, 3 of them were professedly Christian. You listened to a conversation that went from politics to economics to youth to the moral life of America. Do you think that you would notice any difference between those who were professedly Christian and those who were a-Christian or non-Christian? Would their judgments be any different? Their sense of values? Would you be able to pick out the 3 and say, here are some who are so imbued with a Christian motivation that it tells in all of their judgments? We cannot always tell. Which brings up the question that is Christianity really making an imprint in the world? Nietzsche, who was anti-Christian, said something that was profoundly worthwhile. He said, you will never get me to believe in a Redeemer unless you act like someone redeemed. One man who was a very fine contributor to a church, a prominent so-and-so, I mean Catholic, no, not what you think. I mean a prominent Catholic or Presbyterian Congregationalist or something else. That's what I mean by so-and-so. if this prominent so-and-so, he said, if I practiced, he said, what I'm supposed to believe on Sunday, I would be bankrupt in 6 months. Now this divorce between the two is largely contributing to the fact that today Christianity has lost a great deal of its imprint on our social, secular life. And one wonders if it is not to some extent justified. That is, the answer to it we have to work out in our own hearts. Now we've spoken of the moment of truth for bishops, priests, and ministers, then for the laity. Now about the doctrine. How about Christian doctrine? Here again, there seems to be a divorce between 2 things that should very much be united. And this critique is basic and fundamental. If there are 2 things that are ever to be kept together, they are Christ and his cross. No one who professes to be Christian could ever separate the 2. Because he came not as a teacher, he came as a savior and a redeemer. But the 2 are being divorced, along with many other things in our contemporary civilization. So that on the one side, you find Christ, and on the other side is cross. who are divorced, pulled apart. Who picks up Christ? Our so-called Western Christian civilization. And so they present a Christ who would never drive buyers and sellers out of a temple because they prostituted it with their commerce. The Christ who would mouth pious beatitudes on a mount. The Christ whose lips would never, never say anything against divorce, and whose lips would never be stained by mention of the word hell. The Christ without his cross that would pat little children on the head and would tell very interesting stories that might or might not be true. And the Christ who might get into difficulty with civil authorities simply because he was preaching some kind of ethical culture. That's the Christ of much of our Western Christian civilization. Who picks up the cross in the world? Communism. Soviet Union has picked it up. Cross stands for restraint, discipline, dedication, concentration to a common cause. It stands for some kind of fire and zeal which will sweep over the world. It stands for the hard things. It stands for the vertical line of pleasure being contradicted by some kind of self-negation, for a good outside of self. This is the divorce, with what result? With the result that our Western Christ is what? Weak, effeminate, puerile, not a redeemer, not a savior, just a vague kind of teacher to be equated with Buddha, Confucius, or anyone else. That kind of man can never command the allegiance of hearts and souls. He can never ask for zeal. Leaving father and mother, hating all kinds of secondary loves. So that kind of Christ enthroned or preached leaves men cold. And this cross without a Christ has its difficulties too, just as the Christ without his cross. This kind of a cross leads to what? To concentration camps, to dictatorships, to tyranny, to the suppression of individual freedom, to the making of anthills, in which mortals become just like grapes crushed in a great vat of a state. Speak of this division of the Eastern and Western world, that's it. Which is going to win from the point of view of zeal? This is not. If either one of them will win, it will be this one. And it's very likely
road to death, they say, but we're alive today. Chasing dreams, we fly into the night sky. Lights flash, blind our sight. We race into the light. Hearts beat, thunder loud. We're lost in the crowd. We ride the road to glory. Ride our walls to the side on this fearless ride. Awards in gold in hand, we take our final stand. Filmmakers, actors proud, we shout our dreams out loud. We rise.